Okay, good afternoon. You're with Next Generation Internet. I'm Catherine Anderson, the moderator of this panel. Here with me today, Olivier Sauté, co-founder and CEO of WorldBrain.io, and Tuka Yalahti, CEO and founder of MeSensai. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hello, hello.
Hi. So I would like to kick off this session with a little overview of NGI and who's NGI, who contributes to the NGI community. So I'll just start by sharing my screen. There we are. There we are. And we'll go to this overview of who's NGI. So thank you for joining us to discover the next generation internet. The buzzwords for us really are the internet of humans. Just ask other participants to mute themselves whilst I give this presentation. You can hear some heavy breathing there. Don't get too excited about the next generation internet. We're looking at restoring trust according to the European values of protection of personal data, privacy and security, combating disinformation, which is something that you'll hear about a bit later on in the presentation, and enforcing ethics and sustainability. So that 250 million figure between 2 years ago and this year is then divided into the next tranche of 75 million euros, which is awarded directly to innovators such as Tuka and Olivier, supporting their projects. So this funding model is quite unusual in the European Commission, in that the funding organization, in this case Ledger, receives 20% of the funding and 80% is then available to directly fund innovators themselves. We're calling this a cascading funding model, and it's fairly innovative in the European Commission, which in other projects tends to rely on larger consortia who are able to do their own bureaucracy and their own financing and processing. The burden of this is taken off your shoulders with NGI, and you're really able to focus on the innovations that are shaping this future internet. So we have also some coordination actions. So I'm part of the NGI Outreach Office, which is supporting that. More on that later. I'll quickly take you through the various elements of NGI. We'll start with a look at Fed for Fire Plus. And this really is a little bit of an advert for those of you who have experiments that you want to test or validate across Europe. There's a tremendous amount of interest in this because you don't have to visit the facility yourself. You're able to access the facility remotely via your internet connection. So applications are open throughout the year. There's a continuous open call, and you're able to apply, just briefly outlining your experiment, why you want to use the Fed for Fire Plus test beds. And there's a great variety of uses for them, including cloud computing, wireless and wired networking, sensor networks, and software-defined networking. Free for all, just apply. I'll take you through the, we call them the RIAs, the Research and Innovation Actions. So Ledger, of course, supporting today's activities, and the two projects that you're going to hear from later are both from Ledger. 16 new projects, 16 ongoing projects, all of them based on decentralized algorithms based on blockchains. And the most successful projects will then go on to receive additional financing to take them to market. A lot of support is given, not just financial support, but the mentoring support, including the startup boot camps that are so well known and associated with Ledger. We have NGI Trust, which is looking at privacy and specifically on privacy protocols and technologies, cryptography, and very exciting projects coming out of NGI Trust. There are different degrees of support, some of them entailing 100% financing, some of them are co-financed, and there have been 3 open calls completed, so unfortunately no further opportunities there for the moment, with 32 ongoing projects. NGI Zero Discovery is a project that is supporting search and discovery. There are 57 ongoing projects, and the final open call is currently open just for another month, I think. So still a chance to have search and discovery projects funded through NGI Zero Discovery, all open source, as are the NGI Zero Pet projects, open source, privacy and trust enhancing technologies. Again, 9 out of 10 open calls have been completed, but there are still some opportunities. The great beauty of both the search and discovery and the privacy enhancing technologies grants are that they are open source and that you can get even a small amount of financing that can just make the difference between taking your project forward or having to work on something else and it take much longer to complete your innovation. NGI DAPC looks at data portability and services. This is one of the newer initiatives of the next generation internet. Up to 50 third parties will be supported, all looking at technology and solutions addressing the challenge of personal data portability on the internet. 1 of 3 open calls have been completed, so quite some opportunities still open there. SF Lab is looking at self-sovereign identities, business-designed projects, and infrastructure-oriented projects. That first call closing soon, so good to be aware of. We'll look forward to highlighting some of the outcomes. Applications include health tech, e-governance, education, and open disruptive innovation, which is what we're all about here at NGI. NGI Pointer is working with architects to change the fabric of the internet and web. The total budget, again, 5.6 million. You've seen that's a common amount amongst many of the different projects and initiatives. So the Pointer is funding third-party projects to build on research with protocols and tools for keeping European values to change the fabric of the internet and web. So architects here are being called for. 1 of 2 open calls completed, so still a lot of opportunities with NGI Pointer. NGI Explorers are financing technology missions to the US. Researchers and innovators receive a 3 or 6 month immersive experience in the US with 100% of their costs covered. 1 of 3 open calls has been completed, and of the 14 individuals who've already had some experiences in the US, we've had some very encouraging results. They're taking their research forward with their partners with some pretty concrete results coming out and some signatures on common agreements. That's very exciting to see. We'll keep you posted on those. NGI Atlantic, again, US collaboration with a slightly different slant. We're working together with US research teams, and we have a twinning lab, and that's a web space for researchers, innovators, and startups to partner with our transatlantic partners. And the Atlantic team are also looking for an external pool of evaluators. So if you know anyone interested in that, then you might let them know too. 1 of 5 open calls has been completed, so still many opportunities there. I think Nexus is a think tank that is also looking at EU-US collaboration. They have 3 areas of interest: science and technology, innovation and entrepreneurship, and policy. And NGI Forward have funding available. Now, NGI Forward, you may have been familiar with them if you're familiar with NGI, they are the policy arm of NGI and generally do work on policy actions towards our future internet for NGI. In this case, they are also a grant maker. There's money available up to 25,000 euros until I think it's the 3rd of July. So you've got to be quick. If you have a policy initiative that you think is important, a local government policy initiative that you would like to see scaled up throughout Europe or elsewhere, then you better be quick. Some very exciting prospects there. So I've just run you through all the research and innovation actions. The coordination and support actions are listed on the screen. And I'm part of NGI for All, which is doing the overall coordination and communication. Don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have a good story for NGI. And don't forget to follow us on our social media. Now, we have open calls throughout 2020. That does not display correctly, but I can share the proper slide at the end of the discussion. And don't forget to follow us on social media, join into the meetings or drop us a line. You can also post yourself on the NGI map and register yourself or register your project. You can see that we have partners across Europe and it's very diverse. Thank you very much for your attention. So now I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. We'll come back to seeing our panelists. Hi, guys. So I'll just get started with you, Tuukka. Are you ready, yep. Tuukka? Perfect.
Yes, I am.
We're with Tuukka Jalati, co-founder and CEO at Mesensai. Tuukka is a highly qualified and experienced entrepreneur and has a special interest and passion for mentoring and giving back, which we find very touching. Mesensai is among the first 16 teams of the NGI Ledger program, which is also supported by Aalto University and Cambridge Science Park. Mesensai explores decentralized technologies. The first deliverables from Mesensai are the recently launched Unified Science, and I think we'll be hearing some about that, and a concept for a village app, which features a local economy model to support voluntary work and citizen science. Thank you, Tuukka.
Thank you. So maybe let's see if I can get something shared from here. There we go. Are you seeing my screen?
We can see you, yes.
Yes. So my name is Tuukka and I'm the CEO, co-founder of Mesensai, and we are about empowering communities. So what we have created is a decentralized platform that can do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of what is needed to be done when rolling out digital solutions for our communities in relation to processing of personal data and doing it in a manner which is confidential and GDPR compliant. But also we have created a software engine to build powerful mobile applications at a lower cost. And the problem that we are solving is related to communities, which come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, from business networks to support groups to local volunteers and sports clubs. They essentially all need to manage their membership in some meaningful manner, registrations, tickets, subscriptions, and all this sort of stuff. And they need to also be able to engage with their community directly. And now with the new stricter laws on data processing and privacy, it's becoming challenging for them because there's such a fragmentation with it. So you can see that many communities use multitude of different kinds of digital solutions to create registries of the members, to host events and so forth, which means that it becomes a nightmare to kind of like handle the personal data in a way that is documented and clear to communicate, in order to respond to things like data transfer requests or so forth. So we are solving it in Ledger, and we have created a concept to test this out, that how this kind of like a new information architecture should work. And as you said, one side is the Unified Science that we did, and then the other one was the village app for the Giambillieri. The driver in both these cases is that communities have become kind of sensitive to the need of being able to roll out their own digital platforms. And when they roll out something of their own, they have to struggle with two things. One thing is that it's very expensive to develop a proper platform, but at the same time, if they buy it from a software solution provider or a SaaS provider, they are afraid of a vendor lock-in. So our technology is designed in a way that if the communities want, they can then actually acquire the source code itself if they want to further fork it and develop it, or if they want to contribute to open source projects and creating UIs to the backend. So that is one of the key drivers. And maybe if we look at it from the perspective of the village application just very quickly. So here's the case that we did during the boot camps in Ledger program. We were given a challenge to solve a local problem for the local community. And we found that there was this fantastic village of Champiglieri, and they needed something to organize village festival, food festivals. So you would have the event schedules, workshops, signings, participant notifications, updates, and so forth, and then also to communicate between the organizers themselves. They also had previously been using pen and paper system to issue food vouchers. So the food is sold in advance to avoid loss of food and the risk for the participators or the organizers for no-shows. So we can use blockchain technology to create a digital food voucher and make that secure and effective at a fraction of the cost what this kind of a project would have been if this would have been created from the scratch. So that's the power of our platform. And as a long-term vision, we envision that they can use it to integrate new data streams to their village application. Like, for example, they have sensors giving out warnings about potential landslide danger. And they can integrate it into their own application in a way to create a sort of like escalation path. So instead of warning out everybody with a loud siren going off, they can sort of send out targeted messages to the people who are responsible for emergency rescue and coordination within their own communication channel. And this brings the village and its operations together in one system. And essentially, they can also then start using their own local currency to issue small tokens of appreciation for people who contribute to the safety of the village. For example, if the children from the local school would change the batteries for sensors, it would be kind of bad to give them €1.40 as a salary or a payment. But what if they would be able to get a voucher which is valued as an ice cream? So in this sense, to the social aspect to the contributions the kids do. So this is all sort of tying into the whole idea of the next generation internet and human-centric view, is that we'll be seeing more and more communities becoming aware that the data is an asset. And in order to make things run effectively, there needs to be a digitalization of certain processes. But when you move to digitalization, then you immediately come to the world of who owns the data, who owns the structure. Will the village be owned by a huge mega corporation? Will it intrude the lives and the privacy of the people? Or will the people and the villagers themselves own the data and own the value and distribute the value that they generate according to their own models? And these are sort of like very alien thinking to traditional VCs, because we are not trying to create a technology that creates a data monopoly, but instead puts the power of the data and the digitalization to the hands of the community, thus creating and giving rise to the next generation internet thinking and the human-centric. If I summarize this quickly.
Thank you so much. That disaster risk reduction aspect of Gianpiglieri is so, I mean, lives are at stake, and you've just highlighted it in such a compelling way. And by including the food vouchers as a part of a sort of a community scheme, I just can imagine, have you seen much success with it? Are people enjoying using it?
Well, well, we get back to coronavirus now. So
yes.
This was the concept that we created in the bootcamp in November. And by the time that we had the technology ready and deployed in February, we were just due to fly to Jambilieri and start deployment and rollout. But unfortunately, all the food festivals and travel has been cancelled. So the outcome of this and the proven results are based on the field study. We'll have to wait until after the legend. But we are committed to return to Jambilieri and in this case, through no matter what.
Okay, just it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Oh, we wish you all the success with that. I'm just going to check people are aware how to input any questions that they may have. Okay, just it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. We wish you all the success with that. I'm just going to check people are aware how to input any questions that they may have.
Did I lose voice? Are you hear me?
Yes. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. Whilst you have that fantastic presentation in mind, we'll take all questions at the end. But if you do have questions, don't forget to input them now. I don't know if everyone can find the chat icon. It's in the bottom left-hand corner to the right of the raised hand. Just go ahead and put any questions that you have in there for Tuukka, and we'll go through those at the end. But in the meantime, moving straight on to Olivier Sauté, very keen to present the founder of worldbrain.io. Olivier is passionate about verifying the internet with science. He's been working on battling misinformation since 2014 and has seen a rise in his call to action with the rise in fake news on the internet. WorldBrain.io uses NGI Ledger funds and mentoring to support to build Memex, an open source P2P and offline first browser extension to organize your information. And over to Olivier to give us more.
I think you're muted, Ollie.
So thank you so much. Better now?
Yes.
Yes, we got you. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel to talk about a topic that is very, very dear to my heart. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't work on it. Today, I want to talk about a topic that is tangential to the project Memex that we develop, and specifically one of the key learnings that we took out of the work in terms of informing what could be the next generation internet, and specifically one that is geared towards more collaboration and human connection. And when we think about what is broken with the current internet and why we want to innovate on a new internet, then we continuously run into the problems of exploitation of data, lock-ins, data markets, and this is the whole like NGI Ledger thesis, is how can we break open these power structures? And specifically, what is important for to understand is where does do the power structures we currently have limit our ability to collaborate and to have more human connection? And the core question, why? And so what we believe is that we cannot have collaboration without an open web and free communication. We cannot have an open web and free communication without interoperability. And if we think about why the early web was so powerful, it was because you could host your own web server. You could migrate your web server. You could write an email, or still can, an email to anyone, anywhere. You just have to have the address. It doesn't matter which service or provider they use. And so if we ask ourselves why this is the case, then we have to look deeply into the economics of the current web. And here, for example, the way people are rewarded currently when looking, when participating in growing companies and taking the risk is through sharing, through selling shares. And what happens with selling shares and the economic incentives that are created is that the expectation for returns of investors is uncapped. This means the value of that company can grow to an undefined amount, and or the profit dividends are paid out indefinitely for the time a person holds share. And that means, because there's an uncapped return, everyone will optimize for maximizing growth. And so what that means is that there is a direct competitive relationship between the openness necessary, meaning openness meaning losing users, for example, to other services that are better suited, and the investor returns that can be made in that company. And we consider this as one of the core reasons why we have these big companies that now become rent-seeking and exploitative to the current environment. And if we think, for example, also in token economics, we actually don't change that much. In some cases, or in many cases, it's actually worse. If we think about the top 0.01% of of people in the US, they own about 12% of the wealth of the entire US economy. If we look at Bitcoin, for example, which is one of the more decentralized token systems, the top 0.01% own 42%. This means unless we change the economic reward structures of the communities and companies we want to foster, we're not going to change the way the fundamental incentives are designed in the web. And we're always going to go towards centralization. So essentially what needs to change is that we need to shift the dynamic where less company growth does not mean less investor profits. And for that, there's a model called steward ownership, which our company is also following. Steward ownership is an economic investor reward model that exists for about 150 years, and 1.2 million employees in Germany alone are working under this model. And it is one of the key drivers of a stable economy. So we call it in Germany the middle class or Mittelstand, which is one big chunk of the economic stability in Germany. The principles of steward ownership, if you apply them fully, which not all of the Mittelstand companies in Germany do, but they're family businesses, so they have similar dynamics, is a company can never be sold. So there's no open market that can rip the power of the purpose and the purpose out of the founder's hands. And it also prevents that an unstoppable market dynamic is kicked off that actually cannot even be prevented by even the most ethical entrepreneurs. So I assume that many of the CEOs, and we hear from them as thought leaders and very kind people, have to still make very unethical decisions because they have to follow the shareholders' interest to continuously provide growth and profits. And the second principle of steward ownership, the profit shares or the profit of investors are capped. This means there is a limit and an intentionally defined limit on how much investment investors can get out of a company. What it essentially means is that suddenly there is always a total return, and more profit of a company does not mean more profit for the investors. And this means suddenly those companies get an economic freedom to be more interoperable and open, because you can suddenly lose users. It's not the best thing that can happen, but it's not directly competing against the profit interests of the investors. And the second is also, it opens up the economic freedom for companies to become more socially responsible. Because if we think about what would happen once the money to investors is paid back, there is no single person that has a right to claim the excess profits or drive the company to invest all the profits into shareholder payout. And this means it can be invested in improving supply chain environmental sustainability, making workers' conditions better. It's actually crazy. Like this year, I heard about a case where during Corona crisis, BMW got subsidies from the German government, and at the same time deciding to pay out $1.7 billion to shareholders in dividends. Like this is ridiculous, and this is only possible because the shareholders have won a right to claim and know they can claim it and want to claim it because it maximizes their profits. If they had already their profits paid out, they would have the economic freedom to say, of course, we can now take the excess profits to pay for our employees so they have a safe time from the wealth they have been generating with us. But now this is not a possible decisions for shareholders and CEOs or management teams to make. So again, fundamental to creating a collective intelligence web that is open, where communication and data can flow, which is interoperable, is steward ownership. And I believe the European Union has a unique advantage in doing so, in applying this, and also benefits from applying it. This is because steward-owned companies have create a stable economy and stable companies. Steward-owned companies historically have a 6 times higher survival rate than other companies because the employees have skin in the game. They know they don't work for pure investor returns. They work for themselves. They work for the sustainability of the company, because you need to make money, profitably money, for 10, 20 years, and that's how your horizon expands. You don't do it on a quarterly basis anymore, because you cannot optimize for stock value in the end. And other than that, companies that have been funded by the European Union stay in Europe. Like, this is fundamental. 40% of the acquisitions of Horizon 2020 companies happen outside of the EU. This means partially, obviously not completely, economic opportunity is flowing outside of the EU, paid by European citizens. This means we basically siphon off stability into other countries and economic opportunity. And at the heart, this is a very European project. There are steward-owned companies all over Europe, over 4,000 organizations. If you want to get more in touch with those organizations, check out Purpose Economy or Zebras Unite, which are 2 advocacy organizations that try to foster these mindsets and source entrepreneurs that have the mindset of how do we create more sustainable economies. And also, when we think about what happens right now in the European Union is that we always try to replicate the Silicon Valley model. We try to, we ask ourselves, why are there not as many unicorns in Europe? It's because it's not a European mindset to create extractive companies. The European USP, the unique selling point of the European Union is that we care. We have a social responsibility. People don't have the American mindset, and that's why people don't go and want to build exclusively unicorns. So what I hope is that we come to our senses and realize this work on our strength, work with our strength, in trying to build rather an economy of smaller companies that become highly collaborative, that are interoperable, and that are socially responsible. And I think if we really want to beat big corporations like Facebook or Google, then we cannot go with the same model. It's not our DNA. We need to go with an entire community, a cluster of companies that are more collaborative. But there's a huge but. There's a huge lack of funding sources for companies that go down this route. This is because companies that go steward-owned, they need to show from the get-go that they can be profitable. And this means it's very, very difficult to get VC money because VCs don't operate this way. VCs operate with, we inject a lot of money, we expect you to grow, we sell you later. And this means in order to get money in the beginning, our company, for example, relies on grants or very well-meaning angels, but there are not a lot of them. And we have to pay them in a very big return in order for the investments they make to be competitive to what they would get if they invested in VC company, stock or equity-based companies. So what I hope is that the European Union uses this incredible amount of money they put into the startup ecosystem to fund these companies more in the future, which in the end, if we look at how the US system, Silicon Valley has been created, is by companies being funded in their initial research by, for example, the US military. So I hope that we can do the same to create an alternative economy in the European Union. And goal here should be that the European Union, and this is one of their stated goals too, is getting at the forefront of collective intelligence. And this doesn't work by creating monopolies and unicorn companies. We need to have a network of interdependent, sustainable, and socially responsible companies. And I believe that the European Union is uniquely positioned to pioneer this next generation internet. And yeah, I'm excited to be part of it. I'm excited that the NGI has given us this huge opportunity to develop our company further, and hopefully does so in the future. Thanks.
Wow, Oliver, thank you so much. That's really comprehensive and so interesting and so inspiring. I think we all are aware that there are many issues in the world today, but to hear that a solution that's existed for 150 years of steward ownership is being applied by 40 countries across Europe, and that social responsibility has a higher survival rate, it's really reassuring. So you've given us some cause for optimism this afternoon. Thank you. So
you're welcome.
Just see, do we have some questions here? Now I'm looking at the questions on the comment channel. If you do have any questions for either of the presentations, just go to your comment box and put it in. I'm looking at the feed now, and there's some very nice comments being very complimentary. We've got a comment from I34R78. The lads that can dance, NGI is dope. Yeah, we think so too, thanks. Funding box encourages anyone to raise their hand at any time. We have, is this a presentation or a discussion of where the internet is going? It's more focused than that. We can't predict where the internet is going, but we can give you highlights of fascinating projects that are current, that are going to form part of a future internet that's human-centric, that places people at the center. And so we have a question, a technical question here. So, and it's relevant to both of the projects. So I'll ask both of you. This is from Stellian Brad. How has blockchain been implemented? So we've looked at two very interesting but quite different projects, but it would be interesting to hear specifically how decentralized technologies have been applied to implement them. So maybe we'll go first with Tuukka to answer that one.
Yeah, so before the Ledger program, there was another project funded by EU where organizations like DINE created under EU funding this enabling core technology, sawtooth, Zenroom, and social wallet technology stack. So one of the points in the Ledger has been to further explore the pre-created technologies and find use cases and put them into the use. So, for example, in our case, it's integrated into the user experience that is offered on the mobile. So the core technology exists elsewhere, and we build on top of that stack, but we create technology that hides the complexities of blockchains behind a simple and user-friendly, elegant front end. So way I think it is that it's always a question that what do you decentralize and what do you centralize, and what do you distribute. But in our case, what we think is the good outcome is that we don't try to build all the technology ourselves. We rely on others, and we rely on open source communities to create things that we can plug into and exactly the way Oliver was describing, that instead of us trying to create everything and create a walled garden and a monopoly, we rely on technologies and interoperability with others.
Thank you, Tuukka. I think you both answered and dodged the question. But what I understood from your answer is that you use pre-existing blocks of decentralized technologies, and then in order to create your project, which obviously, you're dealing with citizens, you have to protect their privacy and keep their data secure. So it was just a matter of discerning which parts of the information you're going to decentralize. Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, like, this can get very technical. But, there are many views on this. I mean, one view is authentication. How do people authenticate to some system? Is that authentication centralized or decentralized? Is it what type of authentication is to be used? Then it's the question of where the data is stored, who has access to it, how it's being managed, how it's be negotiated, and so forth. So there's always a trade-off between user experience, efficiency, versus decentralization and privacy data security. And in every single use case and scenario, you have to strike a balance between how do you make a system that works for the people so that it's actually being used, so that it actually creates value. And on the other hand, then how do you make it in a manner that doesn't sort of infringe on the privacy, doesn't create walled garden. And I think that's very much what the jury is out there about in these projects, is that what bits are centralized, what should be decentralized, what should be distributed, and how to achieve the interoperability between these systems, both for the system managers and the builders of the systems, but also for the people who use the systems. So, and I think that's the exciting part of the whole next generation internet family of different projects working together, finding out that how does this work in reality, because the fundamentals of the technology that we need to create to achieve these things is so different to the types of technologies that have been made popular and familiar by the giants like Facebook and the others.
Wow, thank you. That you said it would be technical, but you have a gift of explaining something fairly technical in a very accessible way. Thank you. I'd just be interested as a follow-up question to understand, I mean, not just then are you making the code and the programming open source, you're also making the decision-making open, and I know you're very supportive of mentoring and of giving advice to fellow tech developers. So have you been able to share your path and journey through this balance between the UX efficiency and the privacy and data security with other projects? Have you been able to sort of talk them through it as you've led the way?
I think that should be left for others to answer. I certainly hope that I have achieved
Okay, you've tried anyway.
through the different discussions, but I think I have been as much of a learner throughout this process. Every single bootcamp that we had attended with NGI, my thinking has been pushed forward. I'm kind of like a dinosaur in this. My background comes from IT consultancy for giants like Nokia, and obviously the view was very different in that setting. So I'm actually quite a sort of a acolyte to the whole this thinking, and I think I have been doing more learning over the last year rather than teaching.
All right, thank you for your answer there. That's great. Now, I'll ask Oliver the same thing. So, would you be able to explain I mean, I'm assuming the audience is comprised of technical and non-technical people, how decentralized technology has been implemented in WorldBrain.io?
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make when we think about decentralization and blockchain, because blockchains are obviously only is a way to implement decentralization. Where we rather go, the angle we come from is that we want the kind of decentralization that flows from interoperability, where power can flow because users can change services, not because they use a particularly a database. Like blockchains are just a database that distributes data across multiple peers and make sure it cannot be corrupted. But that's only useful for a handful of use cases, and too often it's actually people try to use a blockchain for something where you don't need a blockchain, just that you have a blockchain or have a token. And so we don't use a blockchain, and we're not going to plan to use a blockchain in our core product anytime soon. We're focusing more on how can we make the infrastructure as open as possible to users. And this means focusing on self-hostability, focusing on other providers being able to fork our tool and create economic opportunity. Think a bit in a tool like WordPress, where you have WordPress.com and WordPress.org, which WordPress.org and Automatic are the main developers of the WordPress software, but they provide hosting via WordPress.com. And this will be very similar to how we develop it. Because there you leave the ecosystem open for innovation, and you don't need a blockchain for this. And you also don't need a token. We're unsure how in the future we can distribute or decentralize more of the economic power in terms of creating economies within the companies that might be growing out of what we built. A token might be a solution, but yeah, it's hard to introduce the kind of investor caps in ecosystems where a token can be traded freely in an ecosystem. And so until we figure that one out, we're also not going to deploy any token, or someone else maybe figures it out. But unless it's figured out, we're not going to deploy a token for our company.
Okay, that's super interesting. Thank you. And I like this thinking big. You're looking at creating economies. Go, Oliver, go. I was really interested in your answer for the examples that you've just presented, but we had a conversation on Monday where we were talking a little bit about the work you've done on fact-checking. I wonder what the application then of decentralized technology is on the fact-checking work that you've been working on.
A very, very good question. So the current paradigm of trying to do fact-checking is to create top-down solutions. If we think about algorithms that Facebook deploys in order to link related content, that's a centralized solution that is one truth. It's one perspective on the web. But if we want to really solve misinformation, this doesn't work because, one, it's not precise enough. It doesn't work for everything. And two, people won't believe the information they're exposed to if they don't believe the messenger. And epistemology-wise, the truth is subjective anyway. And what happens in our society as it progresses is that we develop certain shared truth. these shared truths emerge by many subjective truths interacting, discussing. The scientific process is very similar. And at some point, you end up with one person saying, I found this out, and 10 other people saying this is true. And then it becomes a more accepted shared truth in the network. And so if we think about online research, we need to create the same dynamics. We need to be able for individuals to share their subjective reality on what they're researching and give others the opportunity to access this knowledge and compare it with many different people. The big problem is if we tried to build a one-size-fits-all tool to capture this knowledge, it wouldn't work because every single person has a different knowledge workflow and needs different tools to capture and share information. And this is the core reason why we deployed steward ownership in our company, is that our economic interest is not to create a monopoly that serves 100+ million users, but that gives us the economic freedom to build interoperable systems from which hopefully thousands of different tools emerge that can interoperate and where users can iteratively find the tool that works for them the best. So imagine more like an email for knowledge management, where a protocol unifies how those tools can communicate, as opposed to an Evernote for knowledge management, where one provider tries to build a tool that works for hundreds of millions of people. This is the connection why steward ownership is so important to the vision of our company.
Nice answer, Oliver. Thank you so much. You've taken on quite an intellectual journey there, from epistemology and subjective truth to a point which I think illustrates, certainly for me, made it very easily to grasp what you're getting at by alluding to the knowledge sharing in the scientific community. And then finally, with that very concrete example, that it's just so helpful to have allegories to then understand these concepts, which seem to trip off your tongue, but for the rest of us, we're grateful for those clarifications and explanations. So no, it's exciting work, and I think anyone who wants to get in touch with Oliver with further questions, or with Tuka, can certainly feel free to do so via the comment box right now. And your time is running out because we're about to wrap up the session.
Yeah, I have also one more request actually.
Oh,
so
yes.
We're currently, so during NGI, we have been developing end-to-end encrypted sync between devices for Memex, this knowledge management tool you can check out at getmemex.com. What we're now embarking on is the journey of making Memex collaborative, meaning allowing people to share the research they've done online, including like curations of pages, annotations, notes, etc., and discuss those. We would love to get more input from people that have a need for being more collaborative online and being able to that want to share more of their knowledge about online research they do, so that we can understand the use cases better and build the best tool. If you're down for a 30-minute conversation with me to discover your use cases a bit more, please go to calendly.com/worldbrain. calendly.com/worldbrain.
And that's CALANDLY.
calendly.com/worldbrain, the company's name.
Let me put that in the chat here for everybody. WorldBrain, and not with the IO.
I can also write it in the chat.
Oh, okay, there we go.
I was quick.
Oh, you already? scheduled one?
Yeah. I must say that due to the corona and travel restrictions, the fact that we haven't been able to work as a community as close to boot camps is something that I really miss. I think, as you nicely pointed out, that everything that has to do with the next generation internet and the teams working on this is philosophical, and it also means that we have really smart minds in this community, and I've always liked the best those long discussions during the boot camps with other founders about how they think, what does the centralization mean, what does this mean conceptually, what does it mean ethically, and all this sort of a thinking. So when you create something new, you kind of must have this philosophical aspect, and we have a fantastic community for it. Would love to have our session with you, and I encourage strongly anyone who has the opportunity to pick the brains in this community to take it.
Yes, I'm also happy to chat about stuff that you're interested in. It doesn't need to be the user research, but it can be both.
No, but I think it would be closely aligned actually to quite a lot of things that our communities are doing, because obviously communities can be much about working together, creating knowledge together, sharing that knowledge. So yes, maybe we can find an angle for making a collaboration.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for participating. I really enjoyed speaking with you, hearing your presentations, and have learned so much. And I'm sure that other participants have too. I'll just hand back to the Funding Continuity Day organizers. Funding Box, would you like to wrap up the session, or do you have any further comments?
Thank you very much. Short thank you to all of you guys today, and we invite all the attendees to join our other sessions. We have sessions throughout the day until the very last moment at 5. We have the last session at 5, so feel free to join us. You can check the agenda. I will post a link right now, so you can check it. And that's it from our side. Thank you very much once again. It was a really great chat, great talk.
Thank you, Nino.
Thank you for the time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Catherine, for hosting. Cheers. Bye-bye.